Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping show number 168 for April 8th, 2024. We will not be talking about the eclipse all night, hopefully, but we will be talking about it a little bit because I got pictures and I might as well show them off, even though they are relatively terrible cell phone cameras. You're going to be subjected to them anyway. Let me put the ticker up. Whilst I let everybody know that tonight we will be talking about oddities of Wargame scale, and in particular, I had Grand Tactical in mind. What the hell is it anyway? We're going to talk about that and explore some other oddball scales that don't really fit in a recognized category. Tonight, we are drinking something a little unusual, although I had it at Winterfest, Redemption Rye. It is very inexpensive, well, not very, but I mean, relatively inexpensive. It's about $25. Bottled at 46%. Excellent, neat. I also bought a bottle of Wild Turkey 101 rye from the same trip, and it's less good neat. I will be making Manhattans with it. We are still clipping Jackson and Corinth because I got jack done last week with everything else that was going on, which included visiting relatives and some stuff for work and something that I will be talking about tonight, although you won't get the full goodies until tomorrow. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and remind you all to like the video, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Super chats and super stickers are on, so it's a great way to support the channel, as well as a pretty good way to get your comment highlighted. I am guaranteed to respond to a super chat or super sticker comment. I might not give a satisfactory response, and it might not be instantly, but we will do it. So that is a good way to do that. The Discord link in the ticker is probably no good at this point, but I will give a special shout out and thanks to the sponsor of the Counterclipping show, Noble Knight Games. There is a bunch of ways to support the channel in the video description, one of which is the Noble Knight affiliate link, so check that out. We will be announcing the new campaign this evening, so we'll get to that in a few moments. Almost all of the existing talk in the chat so far has been Eclipse talk. So, and making fun of Stigler, which, you know, comes with the territory, right? So anyway, and I got to thank Rogue77 for becoming a warrior level patron over the last week. So thank you. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I don't think I did. If I did, send me an angry letter. I don't mind. Ardwulfslair@gmail.com. All right. So, let's do a little bit of news first, and let me do the eclipse thing first, because I'm just going to buzz through some pictures. Considering that these are cell phone camera pictures, I think they came out pretty good. Now, we were directly in the path of totality, so we did get to see the whole thing. At this point at which this picture is taken through the trees like a dumbass, the moon is about 50% occluding the sun at this point. We did have eclipse glasses, obviously. This won't take too long. Here's me trying to take a picture with the eclipse over my shoulder. That didn't go well. Here is the first photo that I actually got of the actual eclipse. This is, again, cell phone camera through a filter that's intended for it's a plastic throwaway thing. You put it over the camera lens so that you can actually make this work. This is the zoom in of that same picture. Not that great. There's a couple pretty good ones in here, though. Shockingly good for all things considered. I particularly like this one because even though you can't see the eclipse in the sun, this is not through a filter or anything, you can see the refraction of the eclipse in the lens, and I thought that was a pretty cool picture. That's basically the same thing. More eclipse. This is one of the better ones. It's pretty good. And we took all of these literally sitting out in lawn chairs out in the driveway. So we did not have to travel or anything for this. Hopefully everybody was safe about it and not dumb. And these are zoomed in to absolute maximum, by the way. Not on the camera, not in post-production or anything like that. I ain't got time to do post-production on this stuff. Boy, that's interesting. I got to assume that is due to me moving the phone around. It's an interesting shot. And I'm going to see if I can get... This is real close to totality right here, even though the phone's not picking it up. The eclipse is total here. These are the best photos that I got. They're not too bad. And again, you know, a time lapse would have been sweet, John Madison, but I didn't even think of that. Nor did I think to bust out, you know, the official camera or anything like that. Here's me hamming it up. You can kind of get a sense of the weird twilight effect that you had during the total eclipse. Here's pretty good shot of the end of it when it's beginning to uneclipse. And I think that's about it for the eclipse photo. So now that that's out of the way, and that only took about 2 minutes, we can get on to other stuff. Now, as it happens, there is a piece of Wargaming news that I may as well call folks' attention to today. But I will set up the share here, so bear with me just a moment. The Decision, Stigler, you're going to love this. The Decision Games Deal of the Month is the Der Weltkrieg series. $20 off individual games, 20% off individual games, 25% off if you order the entire thing. And I don't know if this is like you ring this up at checkout or what. I don't know if these are the actual prices. But for $5 games, $4.40 is not too bad. And Eastern Front in particular is a really good value. There's a lot of content in there. The game system is very good. I watched a couple minutes of like a Nova live stream, but then they like stopped like 2 hours before the eclipse started. I was confused. So if anybody is interested in Der Weltkrieg, now's the time. There's also a book by Dave Schroeder, who wrote the book, and I'm not sure what this book's about or what to think about it. Globally recognized business consultant and strategist. So this is like a business book published by Decision Games. I didn't know that was a thing that Decision was doing, but okay. Anyway, so now's the time. Like I said, I have the Eclipse, not related. The new edition of Eclipse. It was actually hard to get for quite a while, annoyingly hard to get, in fact, but I did manage to get a hold of it. I want to say I ordered it through Amazon like a year ago. Haven't had the chance to play it yet. I took it apart and set it up, and that's about as far as I got with it. I'll play it at some point. I would imagine folks with actual equipment got much better photographs than I did. I would think Neil deGrasse Tyson has access to pretty good equipment, you would think. So, Papa. So before we go any further, where the hell did my list go? Let's say hello to Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, Board Gaming Geezer, Charles Latour, Chet Bell, Daniel, David Zell, Egret, Eric Goebel, the legend himself, Fucko is here, Jeffrey Wesovich, Joe Okabayashi, John Madison, John Stanley, John C. from the sunny Philippines, Jonathan Dyer, Just a Guard, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming in by tonight. Meandering Mike, Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, Paul Sin, Pawpaw, welcome to the show. Perfidious Albion, Perry Sparopoulos, Sean Torno, Stacky Limit, Stephen Reynolds, Stigler, Todd Cox, and Vicky. Welcome everybody to the show. So, what else do we got for news here? I guess I will mention tonight that, let me pull this down because I don't need this anymore. I will mention that you should be expecting a Charles S. Roberts Awards announcement tomorrow. Let's put it that way. And I'm not going to, I'm being coy, but you all know what the announcement is. So we will be moving forward with this year's process. And I as you know, reluctant to talk about it on the show. But we're ready to go. And that ate simultaneously too much of the weekend and not enough of the weekend. If it had eaten more of the weekend, I'd have had it done and I wouldn't have had to work on it today. So anyway, what else do we got? I bought a flamethrower, so that's cool for burning grass and weeds out of the driveway. It's fun. Let me put it that way. And that's about all I have to say about that. So this is not really off base, Shigler. It does have some roots in Panzer Group Guderian as well as the Army Group South Quad. But there's some new wrinkles in it too, so it's not a copy of the previous game or direct adaptation of those earlier systems. Brant mentions that the Connections Online Professional Wargaming Conference registration is now open 15 to 20 April. Go check out the Armchair Dragoons site at armchairdragoons.com if you would like more. Dean is already in the Hall of Fame, so don't worry about that. This is a fabulous idea. Let me put it that way. If we had a category for this, yes, they would be. They totally would be, because there'd be very little competition. So anyway, and there was an earthquake in New York City, like a significant, it was like a 5 point, I forget the exact number, but it was a significant enough earthquake that the building shook in New York City and probably scared everybody that was above the first floor. As far as I'm aware, some lawn chairs were knocked over, and that's about it. So we won't be dealing with that. So I will now announce the new campaign that you can help support if you want to help support the channel through the affiliate link from Noble Knight Games. We will be going for the Finnish Trilogy. It's expensive. There's 3 games in the series. Noble Knight has all of them at the moment. The thing here says we're starting at 0, but that's probably not actually correct because I don't get like live updates. I get updates once or twice a month. So hopefully by next week, and if not, probably the week after, I'll have an actual number here to give you a guess as to where we are on this. But because it's 3 individual games, and I don't have to buy them all at once either. So I suspect a lot of folks might be happy with the first one, which is the quote unquote Winter War proper. The rest of it is the Volume 2 is the continuation war, and Volume 3 is the Lapland War, I think, something like that. I am a little unclear as to what extent these games stand alone. I think the first 2 might be standalones, and the third one's not. This is absolutely the last word on this topic, on the war between the Soviets and the Finns. Let me put it that way. Calling it the Winter War is not technically correct, because only the first part of it before Barbarossa is the Winter War. So there you go. Joe Okabayashi's got a copy. Mark, thanks for stopping by. From Sunny Lodi. $100 for a single map counter sheet game. It's nice though. It is one map, but it's a double-sided mounted map. And you get I think there's 3 counter sheets. So they're not tiny games. Nor are they, don't let the comparisons with like a quad game confuse you on that, because Miku Games made the Finnish Trilogy, John Madison. I don't know anything about them other than that they made the Finnish Trilogy. Let me put it that way. So don't be confused by the comparisons with old quads. They're not as small as an individual quad battle game would be. So there's that. But it's your money, and you spend it. You do what you want with it, right? No. There is a game called The Winter War, A Winter War, which is that topic for Europa, and I have that too, actually. So the first thing I asked Mark was Lodi, Ohio, because that's about half an hour from here, something like that. So there's also a pretty good, I got Crosby, Stills, Nash in my head, Creedence Clearwater Revival song called Lodi. So there's that. Justigard says that Miku is basically one guy. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly it. I mean, remember that it's exceptional for a wargaming company to not be one person, right? Here we go. Trying to figure out who's going where here. That's very interesting. Marty says that Miku made one other game, Torino 44, use much simpler rules based on a battle near the Swedish border as the Germans get chased. That'd be interesting, actually. That would be potentially interesting. This is true too. There is 2 games in the box, not just one. So let's pull this down, and hopefully I will be able to give you an update on that next week. There we go. Now we can pull it down. So thank you very much, John Stanley, for the support. It is much appreciated. I guess we are. I kind of went back and forth on this a little bit, but kind of the shtick, at least so far, is that I want to go after games that are simultaneously challenging to like actually get played, and also challenging to get because they're games that I wouldn't want to spend this amount of money on in cash. Let me put it that way. So you can help with this by going through the affiliate link in the video description for the games you were going to buy from Noble Knight anyway. How does the fit? Oof. Okay, so this is a good question. Recognize, and this actually will kind of lead us into our topic tonight of scale, because, and in fact, Europa is a game that has significant what I'm going to call misscaling. That's a bad way to put it, though. I think it's fair in Europa's case, but I think it's a bad way to put it. So the Finland expansion for Russia Besieged, as far as I'm aware, and I have it, it's in fact, you really can't see it. It's right down here. You can see the top of the box. As far as I'm aware, although there's a scenario, Winter War scenario, it's not really a standalone product. Whereas the Winter War games, the Finnish trilogy, I should say, treat the entire conflict, all the way up to Lapland, with on roughly, I didn't actually get the number, but it's not a completely dissimilar scale from how Europa handled it. And I actually feel like Europa would be okay at this particular topic. But a dedicated game would be better. And once again, as soon as I get the time, I'll be bringing folks content on these games once I can lay my filthy little hands on them. So, and on that topic, so we had relatives visiting last week, and a big family party thing that happened for my in-laws' 25th wedding anniversary, and that's great. And we did that, but it was it ate a lot of time for a couple of weeks. And then we got the CSR thing, which I'll be able to take a sort of kind of break from starting tomorrow. And then we've got the thing that I dread every friggin' year, the taxes, which have to be done this week. So that's going to be what is going to consume the rest of the week and will undoubtedly lead to an enormous amount of stress, as it does every year. So in-laws. This is a bit of a long story. Maybe I gave the wrong impression, but no, she's younger than me, but she's not this much younger than me. There's Brant being pedantic again and correct as usual. I am not skipping the CNA, so I'm getting there here. So between and then of course, like kind of a couple of weeks, we got Buckeye Game Fest. Now I'll be able to chill a little bit between Origins and Buckeye Game Fest. So we've got a plan to prep for our Brazen Chariots game. That's not going to be a problem. So I'm going to start queuing up some stuff on Campaign for North Africa after Buckeye Game Fest is where I was going with that. So anyway, and I did not win the $1 billion lottery. I don't really buy lotto tickets unless it's $1 billion. At that point, I'll be like, yeah, sure, here's $5. Yeah, for $1 billion, I'll do it. I do too, but it gets into super high gear, and I get absolutely pulling my hair out, frustrated with it when actually doing it. I don't get as frustrated with it until I start actually doing it. I just dread it until I start actually doing it. So there you go, Stigler. This works. I don't know if I'm getting a refund or not. It's complicated. Chances are pretty good that I won't. I'll be satisfied if I only have to pay a couple $100, which is plausible. I could get a couple $100 back too. It's kind of right on the line one way or the other. I won't know until I run everything. So, Chad Kennedy, thanks for stopping by. Oh God, I should probably just find a friggin' accountant and pay them to do it. In principle, I'm willing to do that. This is a good one. That was actually going to be one of the things I was going to joke about was that if I had won the $1 billion, I would have bought Europa from the HMS guys. I'm pretty sure I could say, here's a suitcase full of $1 million. Get lost. And they would have no choice but to say yes. So, and then turn that into a viable game system, which would look quite different than the way it looks today. So in any case, we are not going to get into the semantics of income tax here this evening. So this isn't, Marty's not wrong here, though. I'd be perfectly happy if it worked like a normal country where they would just send you a bill and say, pay us this much. I mean, okay, you could then figure out what you think you'll owe and put it into, bank it as you need it and then send it all in at the end of the year. I'd be fine with that. John Stanley mentions that a CPA does give you additional protection, which is true. Technically, I'm not completely up in the air on that because I go through H&R Block, but the Knowledge Company has the Second World War series, which is a similar, in many ways, system to Europa, but it is not identical, nor should the brands as brands be confused. So anyway, so I'm looking for... Let me go back to William Aaron's comment here because I thought this was a good way to segue. I know I wasn't ready to do that quite yet. Segue into tonight's topic, which is scale. This is not high enough. Hold on. There we go. All right. Which is scale. So one of the things that you'll have noticed, and this has it's not really related to CSR stuff, but this is one of the questions that had to get asked because the CSRs now have categories for tactical, operational, and strategic, and we had to make decisions in some cases as to where some games fit. Some games do not cleanly fit into one of those three buckets. And I'm going to stand up. I have a non-warm feeling about their system. However, I am going to stand. I don't know anything about the customer service. I have had reasonably positive interactions with John Bannerman. That's about all I know. And I haven't, talked to him that much, but I have had some interactions with him, and those were not totally negative. I understand that some people have had less rosy contacts. And I have significant issues with the game system. However, that said, recognize that we're talking really small. We're talking, for one thing, huge games that are really small press games. And therefore, again, if anybody listening wants to say, these are too much, I will not buy these. This is just a bridge too far on price. I completely get that. That's your call because it's your money, right? So I'm not telling anybody how to spend their money. But that said, I don't know that the prices are necessarily unjustified, right? Given the size of the print runs and the size of the company, and he's got a decent team. I mean, so there's that. Again, I got significant issues with the system, but I'm not really inclined to complain about the pricing as such. If it's too much I don't blame you. Because it is a lot, but at the same time, they're large games, and they're large to fucking large games, and I don't necessarily feel like bitching about the price based on that. And it's packed with stuff too. I mean, you're getting a lot, even aside from the fact that they're big games in terms of maps and counters. You're getting a lot of paper in those boxes as well. Admittedly, it's not incredibly professional paper, considering that some of the booklets came loose and stapled, which I'm not a huge fan of, especially at those prices. But again, super small press. So, and I know that Mark is a fan of the system. So, I can see that, and all the same things that I just said, by the way, also would apply to Grognard Simulations. They're big game, and they're, again, big games with very limited print runs, same type of deal. The individual games are, well, you don't hear complaints about the Fasulos in this way. They seem to be pretty amenable fellas to me. This is, I have not played Russia Besieged, and I just played Russian Campaign for the first time in the last year or so. And I've also heard this, and I can kind of see the family resemblance. There's a lot more stuff in Russia Besieged. So, 'cause, 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 ' I do not consider it a huge necessarily jump in complexity, though. But bear in mind that Russian Campaign is really simple. It's a 12-page rulebook, okay? So it's a really simple and straightforward game. And Russia Besieged has a lot more chrome than that. Let me put it that way. Yes, they are working on a computer version, and I could be interested in that, actually. I think that might be very interesting. So, this is not quite accurate, though, John. You just have to get the modules from them, and you can't just go to their... Unlike Decision, which also does this, where you got to get the modules from them rather than going to the Vassal site. You got to get the modules from the Knowledge Company as well. I've got the Vassal module for Singapore, and it's unconventionally built, let me put it that way, but it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's reasonable so I feel like the Molotov Cocktail says he judges all war games against the content and price of Men of Iron Tri-Pack, so consequently consider most games to be too expensive. I think this is completely reasonable too, right? Everybody has to make their own value decisions about what they're going to buy, what their hard-earned, did I close the goddamn thing? What their hard-earned cabbage. So there's a thing that makes the chat appear on the side of the display, and I had it closed. So because when I'm done reading the names off, sometimes I close it without thinking about it, and you're not supposed to do that. So Men of Iron Tri-Pack is a tremendous value. I do think it's unfair to some extent to hold other publishers to the standards of GMT in this regard, because GMT is the largest company in our space, the largest publisher in our space anyway, and they can benefit from economies of scale that are simply not accessible to anybody else. I also think that makes less of a difference than people might think, because not every one of their games gets printed in 10,000 or 20,000 copy batches. But some of them do. That said, Men of Iron is a tremendous value, and I can't complain about that, right? So, but at the same time, Taylor, there we go. We are clipping, by the way, the Jackson at the Crossroads part of Jackson and Corinth. Corinth is done. So we only have to go. It's crazy. I looked at John Longshore's copy of Mare Nostrum at Winterfest a couple years ago, and I kept pulling maps out of the box and kept thinking to myself, yep, this must be, that's not the last map either. Oh, there's more. Holy shit. It's absolutely bananas. So, Dave D'Angelo, thanks for stopping by. He says that Grand Tactical does not work for him. GTS does not do tactical or operational well, and TCS and BCS do both much better because they don't try to do both. So I do mean Grand Tactical as a scale, as a topic, rather than the Grand Tactical series. I don't think that the Grand Tactical there's two examples I'm going to point out here, and I'll point both of them out before I make the statement. There's the Grand Tactical series, which is a multi-man publishing affair, and there's the Grand Operational Simulation series from Decision and mostly designer Joe Youst, but I'd be inclined to, let's give Doug Johnson a lot of credit for that too. And in both cases, the descriptions that we find in the titles of the series mean dick. The Grand Tactical series is really just a tactical series. It's grand in the sense that the games are all really big. And the Grand Operational series, it's an operational game. It's just grand because the games are all huge. So there's not a real difference there in terms of scale, right? All right. So, well, I got all the time in the world here. So, and I'm going to start with the first one. So, but we're not starting with enough credit to get the first one either. So we got to wait for that. If I have to end up waiting for it, that's fine. If anybody's ever going to get them, it's Noble Knight. And we can talk about it, make a collective decision on something else if we need to at the end. So, and of course, I'm a big fan of BCS and OCS at this point. TCS, I'm kind of just starting to explore over the last 6 months or so. So, Eric Goebel says when they release their World War I series, they'll fork out the cash but won't pre-order. They had home by Christmas on the site for pre-order for more than a year. I am substantially less interested in their World War I stuff than I am the World War II stuff. But part of that is I already have Der Weltkrieg, which fills that niche of really enormous operational treatment of the whole conflict, right? Which is a thing that there's really not a lot of examples of. John Madison has looked at the printing cost based on a GMT game he owns, and it's not even close to what they can price at printing in the USA, but they don't print in the USA. And the economy of scale, the breakpoints are different if you are printing in China. So thanks for the bad news, Jacob Getty, but thanks for stopping by. No, they're full-size maps. They're, give or take an inch, they're standard size Wargame maps. They're not exactly standard size because they print in Europe, but they're close enough. And the maps are nice. Stigler is a bit down on Men of Iron. Just a bit? That's out of character. The battles seem way unbalanced. That's fair, but the scenarios will tell you what battles are balanced and which ones are not. Jeff Bueller says Torino 44 is 20 euros plus shipping of 12 euros, still available from the designer for those who want a taste of the finished trilogy. I'm less interested in that than I am in the finished trilogy. I should see Sisu, but it looks more like a finished Quentin Tarantino movie to me. John says that the Balkan Fury 2, which is their take on Marina Mercure, is about to ship. They've kind of been saying that for a while, though, John. You know what I'm saying? John passed his previous copy to me, and I've actually punched and clipped it. And if I do actually get that to the table at some point, that is going to be the game that gets to the table. And their Foxhole game actually looks kind of promising, although unlike the Second World War maps, the Foxhole maps are fucking hideous. Fucking hideous. Oh my God, they're bad. So there's that. The counters are fine. John Stanley says Honor Richmond 2 is a pretty good value for reprint consolidated games with some extra. It's a whole third game in the box. I mean, that's some extra. It's expensive. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody that $250 is not expensive. It's expensive. TKC is the Knowledge Company, which is the parent company of Diffraction Entertainment. And anybody from either one is welcome to come by and correct me on any of the things I'm saying here. So, but that's my understanding. All right. Grand Tactical. So this is the thing, right? So Grand Tactical is not like a term that military analysts, military historians really are going to use, because it doesn't have a defined meaning, right? We have some idea of what the features of a tactical game are. Is there range? Is there line of sight? Those are characteristics that we see in tactical games. Is there logistics or supply? Those are characteristics that we see in operational games. Is there an economy of some kind where you pick what units you are building? That is a feature that we typically see in strategic games. So when we apply the term grand tactical or grand operational, and there's grand strategic too. What's that mean? Nobody knows. When we apply that term, what we tend to mean is a game that has characteristics of more than one of the standard categories, right? All right, how far behind are we? Only about 4 minutes behind. Five maps and 7.5 counter sheets. What game are we talking about here? Because I'm not sure what game that would be, unless we're talking about, we can't be talking about Battle for Normandy, because that's going to have 10 or 11 counter, 10, 11, 12 counter sheets, something like that. All right, Molotov Cocktail says there's one flaw: the balancing options are provided. Yeah, I mean, you do get the balancing options too, but those are ahistorical options. Molotov Cocktail prefers how Battles of the American Revolution did it by presenting the balanced options first with the historic options optional. That is actually how Paths of Glory does it as well. The default scenario is not the historical scenario. The default scenario is the tournament scenario. So Stigler says he was horribly disappointed with Infidel, which is an interesting one. I mean, I'm into Crusades stuff, so I, of course, was all over Infidel, but by the time, it occurred to me that that was something I should acquire, it was out of print. So I was very happy that the tri-pack came out and relieved me of having to run the individual games down. And it does make some mild improvements as well. I am a fan of World War I as a topic. I'm a little choosy about buying World War I games, but I got a decent chunk of World War I games. In fact, since we're talking about that, I'm going to pull up an infographic. It's not really an infographic, of course. Oh, what a terrible, terrible, terrible mess this is. Just a moment. I post these on Twitter from time to time, but this is up to date. All right, so what we have here is my war games by era. Now, this is not topic. This is era. Because if we look at topic, I have another chart for that, and it's a giant mess. And this is not up to date. So we also, in addition to having a topic, we have an era, which is the general time frame in which stuff is set. And the eras, the list of eras, reflects the games that come out, but more appropriately, the games I've actually got, right? If I've got one Vietnam game, well, Vietnam can't be an era then, can it? It's got to go into post-World War II or whatever, right? So we can see that World War II is that slice of the pie, even though there's a continual flow of World War II games coming in here. That slice of the pie has eroded somewhat. It's still twice as big as this next biggest category, which is, unshockingly, American Civil War. I bought something on eBay. What did I buy on eBay? GD41. So that'll be an addition to the World War II catalog whenever it shows up. So I got 194 World War II games and 25 World War I games. That's a big gap. But I also have 77 American Civil War games. To be fair, a lot of which are either magazines or Ziplocs. I posted today, by the way, and I did order from Noble Knight. I picked up the 3 Blind Swords games that I didn't have yet, which are the 3 latest ones. So that helped fluff this number a little bit. Revolutionary War, I don't have a ton. I'm kind of becoming more interested in Revolutionary War, but I don't have a lot in that space yet. The number 3 category is Napoleonic, which is also not particularly surprising. And some of these are Ziplocs or magazines too, but much fewer of them. Mostly these are hell. I think about a sixth of that 75 is Library of Napoleonic Battles by itself. So, Mark, our thoughts are with you. Be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon. So, Brent is in the closet. It's just not the closet you're thinking. Let me put it that way. It's a different closet. This was asked. I am uncomfortable doing this, so I wasn't doing this. Let me put it that way. So the number 3 category is the incredibly vague gunpowder, by the way, which covers a lot of different topics. Consider that it's like everything, basically post-medieval up to the start of World War I that isn't Napoleonics or American Civil War, or something that I've got more games on. Like I've got 4 7 Years War games, so that got its own era. So if I get enough stuff that I can break it out into a separate sub era, I can do that. But I don't do that unless I've got at least, say, 3 games in that era. 30 Years War is another one. I have 3. Spanish Civil War, I have 3. Vietnam, I have 4. And we got some thin ones. And it's the pie is organized in this way to avoid cluttering the labels like this. For example, this is useless. This is complete shit. Gallic Wars. I've got 3 games on the Gallic Wars, believe it or not. 4 games on the Crusades. Ancients used to be a decent chunk of slice, and it's not anymore. Because I am pretty happy with my current selection of Ancients games. And, well, you know, they come in here and there. They don't come in to nearly the rate that Civil War and Napoleonic have been over the last couple of years. So anyway, 196 people watching, folks. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. It could be black powder, but in some cases, if we're talking about something that had like Spanish-American War, it's really gunpowder at that point, right? So I recently reacquired Storm of Steel from Decision, and I think it's an underrated game, personally. This is a great question, actually. At least 2. I've got Under the Southern Cross, part of the Flying Colors series. That's South American naval battles. And I've also got Goose Green, which is Falklands War. And I may have another 1 or 2, but not a ton. So catching up on the chat here. Ecrutal will be selling Flying Colors, so folks, you know, keep your eyes and ears peeled on that. Should you be interested in Flying Colors? I like Flying Colors for kind of completely different reasons than I like Wooden Ships and Iron Men and Close Action. So anyway, I'm trying to keep up with the chat here. Andean Abyss would count for South America, but I don't have it, and I've never had it, and I've never played it. I'm willing to play, you know, I'm willing to play coin games that I haven't played before. But I'm not necessarily, that's another one that I didn't see before. I'm not necessarily going to go buy more coin games unless it's something I'm specifically interested in based on the topic. Okay. So Grand Operational then is an even sillier scale. And, you know, I don't know that Joe or Decision or Doug or anybody involved is really trying to make the claim that it's some kind of new scale. I don't think that's true. I think it's just a catchy name that they came up for the series rules. Dustin Mitchell. So this is Bill Cooper's game, I think is what we're talking about. And I am as a huge aficionado of flat top, I am very interested in seeing this. So Bill was at Compass Expo. I don't recall if this was last November or the previous November. But I had not seen anything out of him for a few years. And it does look like a lot of progress has been made during the time that I didn't hear anything. So, if Carl Fung was here, he might be able to answer you. My understanding is that the next, so there's Goose Green is out, right? So if you didn't order that yet, go ahead and order that. It's cheap too. So, that doesn't help, Brant. I've gotten COVID at all the Compass Expos. So my understanding, and I forget whether this came from Carl or somebody else. My understanding is that the next TCS game in the pipeline is Marine Battles, and that may mean Vietnam rather than any other topic. But I'm interested in seeing that. So, And I got pretty much the last TCS game I'm super duper interested in is on its way to me now. And of course, it will be arriving on Thursday when I'm not in town. So Egric Tall says that Beneath the Southern Cross will be playtested this May. I presume that means the Compass Expo in May. I'm saying there are 3 scales, but not everything neatly fits into those scales. And this is not an indictment on those games that don't fit cleanly into those scales, right? Because some games aren't, and some games work despite that. So I'm saying there's like 3 acknowledged scales, but it's a big block of Swiss cheese with a bunch of holes in it. Jeff Bueller says he has this SST game Triple Alliance War where the fate of Paraguay is at stake, and Pacific War, or the War of the Pacific, between Chile and Peru and Bolivia over nitrate mines. Nitrate mines, I'm not sure that's the right word. Are those the Guano Islands? Where they're not really mines, it's just an island where there's a pile of shit. William Aarons, thanks so much for the support. It is much appreciated. Doesn't map design affect the scale of a game? Yes. However, well, let me finish reading this off. In World War I games, he has the Lamps Are Going Out, which is area control, Paths of Glory, which is point to point, both with 1 map, and the Great War in Europe with 3 hex maps. So remind me, because it's been a long time since I've had a copy of the Great War in Europe. Is it 3 full-sized maps, or is it like 1 or 2 maps with like different map sections on it? I seem to recall the original, because I had the Command Magazine version back in the day. And I seem to recall the original had like the 3 or 4 or whatever it was different zones that fighting happens in on 1 regular-sized map. But maybe it was 2, and I'm just misremembering it. I have heard excellent things about the War of the Triple Alliance game from NAC Wargames, by the way. So map design totally affects it. So let's think about trying to think of okay, so here's our example. Guns of August, okay, and I'm using that because presumably a decent chunk of folks in here have seen it, all right? Guns of August, Avalon Hill Classic. It's a game that a lot of people have fond memories of, and it's a game that I think maybe doesn't hold up super duper well nowadays. So just think about the decision space that you have because that map is a hex grid, as opposed to roughly the same scale, unit scale, in Paths of Glory. And the 2 games are vastly different, because one chooses to be a point-to-point game. I suppose a card-driven game, too, so there's that. One is a point-to-point map, and one of them is a hex map. I think that one could, if one wished, I'm not necessarily condoning this as a good idea. If you wanted to, you could probably redesign Paths of Glory to not use the cards. That's what it would be. You'd be redesigning the game, okay? You can't just not use the cards. It does too much depends on the cards. Just to kind of visualize that in the context of one game has a point-to-point map, and the number of spaces that units can occupy is vastly smaller in Paths of Glory versus Guns of August. And I picked that rather than something like Storm of Steel, which is divisional scale. Divisional units. So yes, it totally does. So once again, thanks William Aarons for the support. It is much appreciated. Joseph Syverson distinguishes between scale and focus. The strategic, operational, and tactical are really focuses, and at every scale, those factors are in play, whether they're represented or not. I think there's actually a lot of truth to this, right? Or at least there can be in a design that is a holistic design that kind of tries to synthesize everything, even if it's not explicitly being modeled in the game, right? So let's say we have, I'm going to reframe this though. And I agree with this basic point. So, okay. So Jeff Baylor says Peru had the guano islands. The nitrate deposits were on the mainland. They were replaced by copper mines later. So I've often said that I feel like the two most important things that a designer, and this is me saying this, so take this for exactly as many pennies as it's worth, which is no more than two. I feel like the two most important decisions that a designer is going to make is going to be what's the game about, and then what the scale is, because the scale is going to, and the next set of critical decisions is what, within the topic, what does the game want to model? What does the designer want the game to model? But those decisions, which is a whole set of decisions, are going to be informed by the decision of scale. Okay. They're part of the topic already, right? But you've also making a scale decision. So let's say that I'd be shocked if this game did not exist, by the way. Let's say that you wanted to design a game on the Bulge. All right. Certainly there's been tons of games on the Bulge, but you want it to be a game that's playable in 30 minutes or less. So you design it as, hopefully we didn't just hiccup here, folks. Let me know if there are any problems with the stream. Where was I? Let's say you want to design a Bulge game, but you want to play it in 30 minutes or less. So you could use a hex map. You could use a point-to-point map. You could use an area map. Any of those things would work. But if you're going to use a hex map, then probably you're talking about a postcard game. If you're going to use a point-to-point map or an area map, which are topologically identical, the distinction between the two is strictly cosmetic. Because you have a location that is adjacent to certain other locations. This is also true of a hex map too. The difference with the hex map, though, is there's always 6 adjacent hexes to any given location, which is a single hex, right? Where that number doesn't necessarily hold true for a point-to-point map or an area map. Now, we might have aesthetic preferences as to we like to point-to-point over area or vice versa, or hex in my case, right? There's like 2 million independent units here. I'm wondering what the hell the leaders are even supposed to do, or if there's a ton of errata. But functionally, there's not really a difference between area and point-to-point. It's just this art style, basically, or the presentation style, because you have a location that's adjacent to certain other locations, and you're either physically adjacent because you're sharing a border with them, or you have a line going to those other locations. That's it. All right. So, okay. Yes. So this is how I was taking the question too, by the way, beneath the Southern Cross. This is tremendously confusing. And I actually kind of wish I recognize that they would be surrendering, I suppose, to GMT and doing this, but I wish they would change the name, because there's now 2 games. One of them is going to be called Under the Southern Cross. The other one's going to be called Beneath the Southern Cross. Semantically identical titles. I would just rather not have that. I think that has created significant confusion already. So I do wish they would change the title. But yes, it is a reimagining of Flat Top. I would at this point call it a reimagining of Flat Top rather than the previous description, which was Flat Top on steroids. All right. So Perfidious Albion says that scale is important in terms of showing how major World War I battles developed, such as the Battle of the Marne, later developing in Verdun. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely true with World War II stuff as well, right? I mean, you can definitely see... let's take North Africa as a World War II topic, okay? You can have a game like Africa Corps, or Avalon Hills Africa Corps, the African Campaign, if you like, or any of the other answers to Africa Corps, and rescale that, and it's going to play out vastly differently. This is one of the reasons why, and I do think there's some level of general agreement in the statement I'm about to make, that Western Desert is one of the stronger, maybe strongest Europa titles, because it is a scale that actually works reasonably well And in this context, I mean the hex scale and the unit scale and the air scale and kind of the turn scale too. The scale oddities of Europa in general are minimized in Western Desert specifically, because of the nature of the campaign, where it's not really that many forces operating in that theater at any given time. Brant, thanks for stopping by. If you said that 25 minutes ago, I apologize. Only like 8 minutes ago. Previously, Albion says if the scale is too high, you won't see the subtle maneuvers that were so critical to how major battles were so impactful. So this is another factor that I think, to me at least, is important, right? I like games that showcase the value and impact of maneuver. And that is, maybe I'm kind of trying to justify my preference for hex grids in making that statement. But if you don't use a hex grid, then you potentially, at least, depending on the game, and certainly some games with point-to-point or area maps do this. Blamps Are Going Out does this, where the granularity of the area map is so low that I don't think maneuver is a thing that's considered in that game, right? Whereas if you have, but then again, it's World War I, right? So if that is a design thesis statement of the designer, then okay, I think that's justified. I think the design is justified, even if I don't necessarily agree with the premise. Let me put it that way. All right, Jeff Beeler says World War I has the Allied supply chain taking until 1918 to catch up to the amount of munitions they needed to make large-scale attacks. Yes. All right, Molotov Cocktail says you could loosely put each type into timescales, tactical hours. So this is another problem, though, right? And again, here's our example, again, Europa, where it is a strategic time. I would describe the time scale as very close to strategic. There are 2 turns per month. On the other hand, the unit scale is firmly operational. The hex scale, remember there's 3 different scales in any given game, okay? Assuming it's not completely unconventional. There's a map scale, there's a unit scale, and there's a calendar scale. There's a turn scale, a time scale, okay? And there is possibly the most, of all the games I have seen, Europa has possibly the most tension between those 3 things. And I am aware that a bunch of different attempts have been made to modify it in certain ways, like getting rid of all the quote unquote ants, for instance, which is fine, but you might be throwing balance out the window doing that. They're very well balanced games. So just relying on the time scale, what I'm trying to say with that Molotov Cockatiel is that just relying on the time scale is fine, but you're just relying on the time scale and not necessarily presenting any information about the other 2 scales that feature in the game. Fiddy's Albion says that a good example of appropriate scale to illustrate why a certain battle and maneuver were major factors is Clash of Giants. I was really hot to get the 2 Clash of Giants games at one point, and I never did, and I ran absolutely cold on it when I watched some playthrough video of Clash of Giants Civil War. The clipper is squeaking annoyingly, and I apologize for that. And I don't even remember what it was that I found to be a turnoff in Clash of Giants Civil War, but something about the gameplay turned me off, even though I was pretty interested in the World War I games. Prophetic Albion also says more dramatic examples of maneuver and scale is Tannenberg by SPI and GMG's Clash of Giants 2. Tannenberg is something I'll probably end up with at some point. All right, so Stacking Limit says the stream's fine. That's good. I had a hiccup over here on my side where it's like everything freezes for a second. I'm like, oh, fuck. And usually it's fine. Jeff Beeler says, in World War I, tactical adapted fastest with lighter machine guns and grenades. Operational needed more and better artillery, and strategically needed vast amounts of munitions and replacements. Don't forget. Remember that time they depopulated Scotland? So John Longshore says, now I'm gonna disagree with John here, but this is a taste thing, right? This is maybe okay. So maybe taste is the wrong word, okay? Because I will concede that there is in a lot of war games, and in the big war games in particular, or maybe even the medium-sized war games, there is definitely a appeal to the obsessive compulsive, okay, where somebody might sit there just silently moving and rotating counters for 2 hours, and that seems weird to a lot of people, okay? So if somebody does not possess that level of OCD, then chances are maybe Third Winter is not the game for them. But we have definitely, finally, one of Tolliver's guys. We have kind of tuned the hobby over the last 50 years in a way that makes it has that OCD appeal, right? And I'm as guilty of this as anybody. So there's that 50 counters per army. You mean 50 counters per like command? I'm not sure I understand, because John Madison here is also a big thing. I think John is being playful. I'm not sure it's a working theory. However, I actually think there's plenty of people who will agree with that, but I'm going to, again, stake the position out that depends on the individual who you're asking the question of. Vincenzo Beretta, welcome back to the show, says, if operational start to the scales where weapons ranges don't matter anymore, then Grand Tactical is the last scale they do. But what is Grand Tactical if it is not, in fact, a scale that blends tactical with the next level up, which is operational? So yes, I agree with this. I wouldn't necessarily say all weapons, because there are tons of games that I would describe as operational where there is some effective range, right? Particularly for like artillery. OCS does that. Gauss does that. There's no range for anybody but artillery. There's kind of line of sight in Gauss, though. Not so much in OCS, but OCS is also, at least most of the time, 5 miles to the hex, whereas Gauss is 1 mile to the hex. So, and that makes a difference, right? All right. Meandering Mike says, point to point can support 3-dimensionality that a 2D area map cannot do. I will concede this point. Is there an example of a point to point being used in this way, though? I'm not sure I could come up with an example. I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm just saying none is immediately springing to mind. All right. So Stigler agrees with me on the Southern Cross thing. I agree, obviously, with myself and Stigler. Slightly back to Southern Cross. Oh God, that would be distasteful, but I actually feel like the number of actual lost cause bozos in the hobby is way lower than people think it is, to be honest. All right, so Frank says he's more concerned with how many combat locations are on the map than what the game's scale is. For him, the map is a function of how long he wants the playtime to be. And I think that the map scale, unit scale 2, and I suppose turn scale, I think if the dial that you are trying to optimize is playtime, then all of those things are going to be a factor. But you're probably not looking at hex maps if that's the case. And there's nothing inherently wrong with war games that aren't on hex maps, right? Let's just get that out of the way. I prefer hex maps myself, but I like maneuver. That also means I tend to like operational, right? Operational games rather than strategic games. Which is not to say I don't like strategic or tactical games. I got plenty of both, but my jam is operational more than anything else. So, but I mean, you're going to need a designer will need to make those decisions very, very early in that process of what the fuck is going on here? Is going to need to make those decisions very, very early in the process. And just, I'm going to use the word mass here. And what I mean by it is number of locations that you have to be concerned about as a player, number of units that you have to be concerned about as a player, number of physical pieces that you have to handle as a player. These all have a huge impact on playtime, right? Turn length can too, but you could have, 10 turns per month, which OCS has roughly anyway. OCS is roughly 10 turns per month, and those individual turns may take far longer than the 2 turns a month in Europa, for example. So, I mean, obviously, it's a significant factor. So, Jeff says that Europa is not granular enough for Western Desert, at least on the Allied side. The Italians get too many ants to build battle groups with. Supply rules are very abstract. So when we played with the supply rules out of War in the Desert. Those may be different from Western Desert. The supply rules in War in the Desert suck. They suck. They're like OCS, but shitty. It has, with just as much needless accounting and yet way less flexibility because of just the granularity of it. Again, it's the same Europa granularity problem that gives me hives. So, Jay Sturgill, thanks for stopping by. It's been a bit. Andrew Detterers. Drew, thanks for stopping by. Says, operational favors, maneuver, grand tacticals, more about supports, equipment, and reinforcements, etc. Sure. I mean, in principle, yes, I agree with this statement. But again, those are tactical considerations. So you have both tactical and operational considerations. And maybe that means that you put the game in one of those two bins, right? Without using the term grand tactical. Tactical can be minutes. I think I'm absolutely stumbling here. I think ASL is like 15-minute turns or 10-minute turns or something like that. Folks, we are now about 10 minutes behind in the chat, so we're going to try and get up while we hear from our friends at Noble Knight Games. So take it away, Noble Knight.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, thanks, Noble Knight, the official sponsor of the Counterclipping Show. And remind everybody that there's a whole bunch of ways to support the channel that are in the video description, including the Noble Knight affiliate link, which if you buy from Noble Knight, use that link and I will get a little bit of a kickback in the form of store credit, which will go toward the campaign for the Finnish trilogy, which we're going to have to hope that they get a copy of the set, whichever one's sold out now. When I checked it a few days ago, they had both of them, but apparently they don't anymore. So that is not your problem. That is my problem. We'll worry about it when the number is there anyway. Right now it's academic. So, all right. So we had a super chat here. John Stanley, thank you so much. Again, the support is as always appreciated, and I would buy the shit out of this. GTS on the defense of Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. Marines keeping the airfield open. Keep the Japanese troops far enough away from the airfield. Yeah, I think this could work. A lot of times these Pacific Island battles are suggested as topics for game systems that normally treat with like Eastern Front or something like that. And the answer is a lot of times there's no way this is going to work. Guadalcanal is one of the exceptions where I think you might not be able to get a BCS game out of Guadalcanal, but I think you could get a GTS game on Guadalcanal. I think company scale is actually a pretty workable scale for this battle. And apparently Adam Starkweather agrees because he's done the 3 island games, which I missed last week, by the way. We're currently playing CSS Saipan. All right. We are fully clipped all the Confederates, but there is just an insane number of independents, and I'm not sure what's going on with that. So I would buy this in a heartbeat. A lot of folks feel this way, that the ants give Europa flavor, and I've never played any of the super duper early ones, right? I've only played, what have I played? So I've played Second Front, I've played War in the Desert, I've played Balkan Front, which we kind of played together, but sort of, but not exactly. And then I played Second Front again. Not the entire campaign, though. Is there another one? I've noodled with like Case White and Narvik back in the day, but to call that a play experience is maybe stretching it just a little bit. Marty says Guadalcanal is tough. The other thing with Guadalcanal is it parts of the campaign you need to worry about naval too. So Frank prefers non-contiguous movement in combat, which require neither hexes, areas, nor point-to-point linear connected locations. This is true. Depending on the scale, maybe it doesn't matter, right? Maybe you have, I'm throwing this out, right? I'm not using Frank's upcoming Divine Wind, which looks super duper promising, by the way, and I heavily suggest everybody who's vaguely interested in the Pacific War check it out when it's a little closer, and it'll be coming out from Compass. If your map scale interacts with the turn scale such that, hey, I could get an American carrier task force from Pearl to the Coral Sea in a turn, then who cares? Why track that, right? So that's a completely reasonable position to take. Meandering Mike says he signed into GMT, but it doesn't show games that he has on order on the individual game page. Did they break that feature? I am unaware of that feature ever existing on GMT's page. I do see that on MMP's page, although every time I leave MMP's page, they do sign me out. So I have to sign back in to see that information. Unless I'm being adult, which is never impossible. All right, but you can go to see your pre-orders by going to see your pre-orders, right? I've never noticed that it says that on the game page itself. Or I can be stupid. That's possible. Findle70 says sometimes there's two different factors: the action a game plays versus the decision space being represented. You wouldn't be making high level decisions pushing around regiments. So this is kind of a scale issue too, right? This is I'm reluctant to describe this phenomenon as designers being unable to make their minds up about what scale their game is supposed to be. But this happens a lot. World in Flames is my go-to example in this state. Is it a strategic game? Well, is it an operational game? You got individual quote-unquote divisions floating around. You got every ship up down to fucking cruisers. That to me doesn't say strategic. And yet it is allegedly a strategic game. And it does model strategic stuff. And if I am asked what kind of game World in Flames is, I will tell people it's a strategic level World War II game. But it makes many incursions into operational matters. And this is just one example. There's games that do this all over the place, right? Another example, I hate to hang Mark out to dry for this, right, is Pacific War, right? Now, I have said, and Mark has said, and I believe Mark has been crystal clear on this, that Pacific War is fundamentally an operational game, okay? And that the strategic scenario is included because they thought they had to, and if somebody really wants to play the entire war out using that system, go ahead. But if you do, you are playing a strategic topic at an operational scale, okay? And I applaud the wherewithal of anybody who is with the dedication to do that, but I don't, right? Another example, though, is what is and Stigler and I have been back and forth on this for literally a couple of years now. Is Library of Napoleonic Battles tactical or operational? I call it tactical, but Stigler calls it operational, and it's really neither. It doesn't fit cleanly into either of those categories. It's got a few tactical bells and whistles. It's got a few operational bells and whistles. The scale suggests that it is the map scale and the unit scale suggests that it is an operational game and not a tactical game. And I think the only reason it's at the scale that it is because Napoleon's Last Battles was at the scale that it is. And that's the quad format, right? All right. We did a piss poor job of catching up on the chat, by the way. Oh, so Mike has an underwater Atlantis design using point-to-point. So potentially, I think this is absolutely right, that you could model 3D movement using point-to-point in a way that would be maybe not impossible, but a giant pain in the nuts to do with hexes. And to demonstrate this point, I will point you at... Where is it? Star Force, which is on the shelf behind me. SPI Star Force is a hex map. It's got full 3D movement that requires trigonometry. Yes, there's a table to help you with that, but nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do trigonometry in their recreational time. Okay, that's just not a thing that people do. So doing something like point-to-points or areas for something like that might make a ton of sense. Actually, probably the best implementation of 3D movement on a hex grid that I have seen is probably Squadron Strike. It's also very complicated, and there's a full digital implementation of it that's very robust, and I was massively confused by. All right, so Stigler says he thinks publishers are kowtowing to fast and breezy games to too large a degree. If you only have half an hour to play, then guess what? You don't have time to play a war game. Well, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want to play a war game and you don't have time. Okay, fine, right? Some people's lives do not accommodate that, or their level of OCD does not accommodate that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that in terms of the industry, I don't want to use the loaded language that Stigler is deploying here. I think in terms of the the industry impact, I'm going to go back to what I have always maintained, which is that, yes, there are plenty of large and complicated war games. There are also plenty of quick and simple war games, and there always have been. There's no shortage of those games now. There is certainly some visibility challenges, like for the Decision quads. They have some quads too. But the Decision, folios and minis, which are very accessible, very fast to play, no, I don't see them getting a ton of attention. And I feel like they should, because those are things that people say they want, right? Well, why aren't people paying more attention to those? Now, when I say people paying attention, I may have a bias in what I'm seeing because I watch a lot of people on YouTube, right? And maybe just that the YouTube people, we're all lunatics. And we're maybe just not dealing with that right now. So, all right. So Jeff Mueller says the TCS has two Guadalcanal games, Bloody Ridge and Metanicao. Do I have Bloody Ridge? I don't think I do. I do have Metanicao again. I bought it again. Prophetic Albion, presumably we're talking about NATO nukes and Nazis, a Thai Bomba classic. Mine immediately went to the silly movie Surf Nazis Must Die, or for a later generation, I suppose, Iron Sky, where there's a Nazi moon base or some other thing. All right, Greg Grant. Oof. Okay, so Greg Grant says he thinks this is as much as an Echelon thing. I think that's true, but Grand Tactical tops out at Division. That's a really high scale to it's a really big unit, basic unit scale to even for Grand Tactical. I think if you're talking about divisions, you are minimally talking about an operational game. Again, that's just what is implied by the unit scale, not necessarily what is implied by the map scale. I've heard people describe Europa as a division scale game. They are full of shit. There is no way that is a division scale game. There are 20% of the counters are divisions, okay? The other 80% of the counters are units smaller than divisions. So where you want to pinpoint the scale exactly, I don't know, but it is only nominally a division scale game. The hex map, the map scale fits a division scale game. But again, this is part of the tension in Europa because of the OB. All right, so William Aarons clarifies that the first Great War in Europe it sounds like there's two maps. There's a West Front and an East Front map. That kind of rings a bell, but again, it's been for a long time. Alistair, you can complain all you want. I can't keep everybody happy. As a general statement, not directly in response to this, you can. There's people that have been saying this for the last couple of years, and they were going to say it regardless of what anybody did, and they have felt free to make up their own literally fictional winners in some cases. So I'm well past the point where I am losing sleep over this trivial nonsense. Pay attention if you want. If you don't. It's okay. No one will be offended. I mean, okay, I Stigler, I'm here with you, man. I'm here with you. Not everybody's here with us, okay? All right, so Joe Mentum, we talked about this with Amabel last week, actually, when we had her on the show with Dan. Table Battles is a really neat game. It's a really neat way to kind of distill down a wargaming type experience into something that doesn't take a long time and or that you can play multiple iterations of. I'm probably overdoing this, but I'm overdoing it on purpose. I'm just throwing all these in a GMT tray for now. I'm trying to use the trays that came with the SPI games, but the lids don't lock very well. I'm going to have to come up with a solution for that. Another thing that I haven't made any progress on at all, unfortunately, is getting the 3D printer running again. That's got to happen. And that may be a thing that we put significant effort into, or at least finally get around to once BGF is over with. Maybe next week. We'll see, man. My calendar sucks. What can I say? God. I got to tell you, Bill, my first thing that I was going to say in here is no, absolutely not. However, it is actually kind of a good idea. And I've always been, it does come up a lot, and it's because we spent a year and a half playing this at some point in the last 5 years, right? So significant effort has been invested in this game system. And as much as I complain about it, I went and bought all the fucking things. So, while yes, it's aggravating, it is also interesting. It's fun to play. We've always gotten are plausible historical results out of it at the end of the game. So we could have a mod slap fight. That would be hilarious. All right. I got the message, Alistair. Don't worry about it. It's all good. All right. So Jeff Bueller says, is Grand Tactical dependent on the size of the smallest independent unit on the battlefield? No, I don't think so. I think when you say a given game is this particular scale, I think what you mean is that it sticks to that scale closer than anything else, right? This doesn't necessarily mean that the smallest that you have to, because otherwise you could make the same argument about the largest unit. It's like, okay, so I got this core on here and every other unit is a battalion. Well, it's a core level game then. I mean, you could apply the same logic there. So to me, the scale is set, or at least described, by the most common unit, or unit scale in the game, or map scale or turn scale or whatever, right? I will repeat the thing I said before. I think Western Desert is one of the strongest Europa games. It is a game and I also agree with Jeff Bueller to a certain extent, and in his earlier comment about it, the scale not quite working. However, I think in Europa terms, I think the scale works as well in Western Desert as it works absolutely anywhere else in the series, and I think probably better than anywhere else in the series, with the possible exception of Narvik. And I would say that the best games in that series are, again, unless you want a monster experience, in which case maybe you're looking at Fire in the East, are in no particular order: Narvik, Marina Mercur, and Western Desert. And the if you were to get the GRD versions of those would be Storm over Scandinavia, War in the Desert, and Balkan Front. And I've got the later versions of most of the Europa games. The exception being Fall of France. I've got a first edition Fall of France. So, Advanced Squad Leader Academy, welcome back to the show. Thanks for stopping by. Has some GTS, but can't wrap his head around the rules. You know what? Set up and play it. Once we started playing it, after a couple hours, I didn't even need to look at the book anymore. Everything's on the card. Okay, so Drew says, if he has to take a hill, the game's tactical. If he moves around a hill and the opponent can choose not to defend it, then the operational. I think this is, for certain topics, I think this is actually a completely viable yardstick. For other topics, less so, right? Stack limit, GTS, this would be Greatest Day, Gold, Judo, and Sword. And I think we're pretty close on Utah. That should be coming out pretty soon. Jeff Anderson, thanks for stopping by. Good luck to your Indiana Boilermakers. It's Indiana, right? Why are they named Boilermakers? Did they used to make a lot of boilers in Indiana? I'm not sure what's going on with that. Anyway, let's try and catch up. Ooh, yeah. I have this. This looks neat, and I really have not done anything with it at all. This is something I'm interested in. This would be my third. I have 3 games on the Peloponnesian War, so clearly it should get its own era, right? I've got this. I've got Pericles, and the other. I've got this and 2 Mark Herman games, being Pericles and the classic Peloponnesian War. Why aren't there more games like this? Why aren't there more games like this? It's just such a unique and fascinating design. What makes Pacific? Molotov Cockatiel, I'm going to give you the pat and shitty answer. Mark says it is. So, but so we are talking Pacific War, not War in the Pacific, although I would make the same arguments about Pacific War in the Pacific as well. The focus of the scenarios is on the quote unquote campaign scenarios, and those are operational scenarios, and that's why it's more an operational game. Also, Mark says it is, and I believe Mark in this case. Now, see, we're going this. Yeah, but it is. But it's both. That's the thing. It's both. It's neither. It's both. It's neither. This is the topic here, folks. Games that don't fit properly into one of the common bins. Facing is not a factor in the Library of Napoleonic Battles, but the handling of supply is very abstract too. I would call it tactical. The Eagles of France is a regimental scale Napoleonics. I would still be calling that tactical at that point. And the benchmark, though, is, and this also applies to Library of Napoleonic Battles, is what's the game about, or at least what's the scenario about? If the scenario is about a battle, then probably it's tactical. If a scenario is about a campaign or an approach to battle, or as Kevin Zucker calls it, an approach to battle or whatever, then it's probably more operational, right? In Eagles of France, they're battle games, right? And that's basically it. You do have a little bit of the maneuver is very rich in those games. And, but I would describe them as battle games. The Library of Napoleonic Battles, on the other hand, depends on what particular game you're talking about and what battle you're talking about. You can get an approach to battle scenario, which gives you a little more time and space to maneuver into where the battle happens. And in some of the games, you can play a whole campaign. For example, and here's the thing though, back to Stigler here, if the hallmark experience of either Napoleon's Last Battles or Napoleon's Last Gamble or any of the other ones that include a single contiguous campaign is the campaign and not a specific battle scenario, then it's totally an operational game, right? Or at least more an operational game, but not all those games have that, right? There might be an approach to battle scenario or two in Napoleon against Russia, but there's no contiguous campaign. The campaign is you play all 4 battles in a row. That's the campaign. Yes, exactly right. Perfidious Albion, you are actually doing math. Oh my God, it's math. We hate math. I don't hate math, actually. I'm just not naturally gifted at math. This is also, there's a point to this too, but I think one might find oneself in a trap if one relies on the statement that tactical is defined by the weapon types. I think there's some truth to that, but you can also get yourself in a situation where you have an operational or even a strategic game that is built off the combat model, the factor scale is built off of TO&Es, and if that's the case, then that's still a factor even at those higher scales. So not every operational game has cookie cutter units where every Panzer division is an 80-12, for example. Plenty do, but there's plenty that don't. That's one of the things that I haven't probably mentioned in a while that I don't like about the Battle for Normandy is cookie cutter units. There's a lot of cookie cutter units in there. I'm not sure it's all cookie cutter units, and I don't know for sure that the new edition will retain that, but I imagine that it will, because it's otherwise a game that is very good. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel there. Designers tend to design what they want to play. Yeah, totally. That's totally a fact. I did not finish Iron Sky, the movie. I thought it was too much. Let's put it that way. Okay, so Adam Misnick, welcome back to the show. The old Napoleon at Waterloo / Blue and Gray system by SPI was described as grand tactical, and again, I would describe as grand tactical because it doesn't comfortably fit this from a scale perspective. This is exactly the same situation as Napoleon's Last Battles. I would describe it as grand tactical too, because it doesn't comfortably fit in either tactical or operational, right? Starfire. Ooh. Yeah, Drew, but they're separate products though. I still have somewhere around here, I still have Galactic Starfire, which is something else. Let me tell you, that's the strategic game. Starfire proper is just tactical starship battles with a very clean, easy to play system. In a later product, you got the interception maps, and in the whole, what the hell was it called? Imperial Starfire, perhaps, is the one that I have. And that's, I haven't looked at that in years. That's like an incredibly detailed campaign game. Well, you do own Europa then, don't you? Even if it wasn't Europa when they created that. I do I will say that just strictly from an aesthetic standpoint, now this is ignoring Total War and that whole fiasco, but I would say that I'm done clipping at this point, by the way. I'd have to bust out the Union counters for Jackson at the Crossroads, and I don't feel like dealing with that right now. The Confederates are all done, not organized, but they're all clipped, so that makes me happy. Catching up here. Oh, there we go. Grogshed has Balkan Front Europa on his table. Balkan Front's solid. It's a nice puzzle. It doesn't take forever to play. It's a little dense. It's quite a bit denser than in terms of counter density than say Western Desert, but it's okay. It's not tremendously badly so. So Jeff Mueller says, Warren the Desert is better than Western Desert and adapting Europa to North Africa. Well, that's the one I've played. I've actually not played Western Desert, the old one. I mean, I'm prepared to accept this. But you do have that bullshit supply system, which I aggressively don't like. Adam Mesnick says Europa was described as a core level game with components of the cores as breakdowns and to show special abilities. Where is that? That's right here somewhere. Hold on a second here. Where is that? Oh, it's right here. 1990 Game Designers Workshop catalog. I want to say, yes. Okay. So here's their GDW's blurb for Fire in the East. Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, is the largest military campaign in history. It takes a detailed game to do justice to it, and Fire in the East fits the bill. 6 maps and nearly 3,000 counters, extensive unit differentiation, complete rules for the air war, detailed logistics rules, weather, doctrinal limitations of Soviet mechanized forces, naval rules, and much more. Fire in the East covers the campaign from its beginning to the end of the Soviet 1941-42 winter counteroffensive. It's a terrible place to stop. So just when it's starting to not suck anymore for the Soviets, the game's over. That's a terrible decision. The Ultimate War Game, that's possibly not even hyperbole. The product of years of research and design effort because of its complexity, it is intended for the experienced war gamer. $60. Which, as I recall, turns into like $22, like $180, something like that. So I'd expect to pay for 6 maps and 3,000 counters. I'd expect to pay close to $200 nowadays. Well, we don't get any of that language in the Game Designers Workshop catalog, but that doesn't mean that they didn't describe it that way. Somebody surely described it that way. Oof. Very interesting. I don't take this, thinking more closely about this, and with the experience of having played Second Front, I don't think that describing it as a core level game that functions this way really makes any sense. And the reason is that they never gave you enough fucking core counters to actually play the fucking game with, at least for Second Front, right? Where you've got just an absurd number of units. You just don't get enough. And I think the same is probably true of, I'm not sure you even had core counters in Fire in the East and Scorched Earth, but I haven't played those, so I don't know. This makes me think of Campaign for North Africa, actually. And I just, in that context, this description is not making sense to me. That doesn't mean nobody said it, but there you go. Oh, Purdue. Well, what's the chicken got to do with that? Anyway. All right. Ooh. Okay, great question. I haven't played any of the VG Fleet series. I would probably consider them operational, but that is a back of the napkin statement. I wouldn't take me saying that very seriously. The person you should ask is Mo on that, because he's working on the revisions with Belkowski. So, Harpoon is tactical, as Vincenzo points out. I would absolutely do that. Oh, so, this is a great question. So recognize that we have access to these people. And we'll be encountering some of them at Origins. So, maybe this is a question I will actually ask, but it has come up in some conversations before. And we tend to get descriptions. I feel like our descriptions of, or definitions, maybe definitions is too strong a word. Descriptions, the terms should be descriptive, okay? I feel like our descriptions of tactical, strategic, and operational are reasonable and apply to most games. But what about when they don't, right? That's the question. Now, there's a difference in outlook between the folks that are doing professional war games, whether they're participating or they are practitioners. I think there's a significant difference between them and hobby war gamers from an outlook perspective. Alistair says he dislikes operational games. Oh dear, he's making a joke. Professor Albion says, what's cool with the VG Fleet system is that the previous design task force had a lot of really interesting innovations. Was that also Balkowski design? such as missile type screening from SSM and electronic warfare? Or was that an SPI game? Which doesn't mean it wasn't, Joe Bukowski. This is true too. This is a good point. And I've already mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. Speaking of professional wargaming, Connections Online will be 15th to 20th April. Boy, they don't take much. There's not much lead time on that, is there? That's like next week. So it's like next week, and it is worth checking out. The chances are there'll be some very interesting things there. Not all of which will be relevant to the hobby wargamer, but some of it will. And you will end up with some pretty interesting insights, I think. John Stanley, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Big Terp. Starfire started out as an easier option in Starfleet Battles, but then get out of hand with the second expansion, Starfire 3. So I had there's like a middle edition of Starfire in there after Starfire 1, 2, and 3. They did like a basic box set and then like another box set that was called Imperial Starfire, and that's the ones that I have. It is a cool game. And it plays a lot like Starfleet Battles, but incredibly simplified. William Aarons, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Has 4 postcard games on the Battle of the Nations, which can be combined into one larger game with 40 counters. Are these the ones from Against the Odds and or whatever the company's called? Or it's hard to say. Distributed by Against the Odds or Lands Connect or whoever we're talking about at that particular point, right? Oh, the prices in the SPI catalogs from the 70s are even more funny, actually, as far as the prices are concerned. All right, so Drew says certain battles or campaigns don't make sense except at operational. Okay, so Jena, Vicksburg, I'm going to disagree with you on Jena, but that's because you said Jena and not Jena Auerstadt. If you say Jena Auerstadt, then I'm going to kind of agree there. Vicksburg, if we're talking about the siege, I think there's not a lot of siege games. Let's put it that way. The upcoming Thunder on the Mississippi, which will deal with the Vicksburg campaign, will deal with the Vicksburg campaigns. You're going to have Champion Hill and Joe Johnston marching his army in from the east and that other stuff. So it's not just the siege. Valley campaigns, yeah, operational is where Valley shines to me. I totally agree with that. Okay, so John, and I'll take John's word for this because he's played this. Generic core markers in Fire in the East and Scorched Earth without, but there's not enough. Okay, there's not enough. I can tell you that. And Meandering Mike says, doesn't have production, don't consider strategic. I'm inclined to agree with this particular feature. Well, so the other thing with Fed Empire is most people that play Fed Empire, like play it and not have it on their shelf like me, end up with multiple sets of the counters, so they can accommodate extras. Yeah, we totally see this. You see this a lot in Fire in the East too, actually. So Eric Goebel, thank you so much. Much appreciated. I will surely acquire more World War I games. One of the things I do want to pick up is Tannenberg, actually. Just kind of see it. And I might pick up, guess you can get Tannenberg cheap. I did do the Yeehaw ad, John, but we might, I don't have to do it again. I don't want to do it again. But Tannenberg will give me a look at the Great War in the East quad. It's the fifth wheel from that quad. So I kind of want to see it so I know whether I want the quad or not, right? All right. So Jeff Bueller says North Africa had 2 to 3 core aside plus sideshows, which is much smaller than these. Yeah. Now, yeah. So treating, say, War in the Desert or Western Desert like as described, like a core level game where you're moving or divisions, or anyway. No, they are cores, actually. Where you're moving the cores around and then you kind of maintain the contents of the cores off map. Western Desert can actually work that way. Because the number of counters you're dealing with is small enough that you have enough counters to manage them in that manner. All right. Vince Albion says I have not played Federation Commander. I should probably try it at some point. We play a couple games. I play a couple games of Starfleet Battles a year, not a ton. So Sebastian would be a good person to ask. I don't know if Sebastian's going to be at Origins this year, though. He might be. He's been there before. I'm not sure that's true. His game has been there before, more than once. I'm not sure I've met Sebastian in person, and if he had been at Origins, I probably would have. Yes, that's about right. Yeah, I mean, it's a big game, right? 1979, I want to say. Shit, I forget now, and I just made a video on it. I'd have to look up the exact date. It's definitely late 70s. You know it's after 77 because it's in a box, right? Rather than that miserable flat tray. I'm now up to six SPI flats, which is more SPI flats than I want, but sometimes you get the flat for $30 and the boxed version is $230, and I'm like, I'll buy the flat, thank you. And I do have a place to store them now, so there's that. Doug, thanks for stopping by. He says that two I think he means too many designers, and I don't know if it's too many, but some, yes, that's definitely true, are so focused on creating the most accurate, detailed OOB that they don't bother to stop and consider whether many of the units are appropriate to the design scale, aka Europa. I agree with this statement. I don't know if Doug means to say too many here or not, but I don't know if it's too many, but there are definitely some. And the thing for me with that is that at least in some cases, we're talking about games that I would otherwise find fairly interesting. All right, Fed Empire has production. It's definitely strategic. In execution becomes operational. Yeah. With Planetary and Starbase, so I still haven't ever played it. I want to. It's a thing I would like to do. Roger Hemsath says Europa's not full of questionable procedures like determined defense and Zoc bonds and cards that give magical powers. I mean, I could see this, but it has questionable procedures in it, like the Cajun National Guard unit, for example, that literally has magical powers. So I think Roger's being a little tongue in cheek here, but and I don't disagree with this. I actually do feel that there is a certain feel of artificiality that is brought to the Simonich operational games by not really determined defense, because I think that's easy to rationalize, but Zoc bonds specifically feels weird to me sometimes. Those games are still good and they're still worth playing. All right. Is there a grand strategic level? This would be a great place to cap this off because we really haven't talked about this yet. And I think there is. So the term grand strategic, I got to phrase this a little bit carefully just to be accurate, not because I'm afraid I'm going to make somebody mad. Somebody's going to be mad. What can I do? The term grand strategic is nowadays most closely associated with the Paradox Studios computer games. All right. And if we take, and these are very detailed socio-political economic models that have a substantial military element as well. And to what extent the military element is important depends on which specific game you're talking about. It's less important overall in something like Victoria 3 versus something like Hearts of Iron, where obviously it's very important since it's World War II. But that's also sometimes called grand strategic. And there has definitely been, in the context that we've been talking about tonight, where some designers kind of lose track of that and accidentally put your operational stuff in their grand strategic game. Paradox is totally guilty of that. On the other hand, we do have the example I want to use is Europa Universalis Price of Power, which is an adaptation of the video game. It's very different in a lot of ways, and certainly very different from the original Azure Wish game. Although at least one of the designers, I'm not sure if both the designers or not, ended up at Paradox to design Europa Universalis, the computer game. So, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of when I think of grand strategic. I think of really high level and probably fairly abstract. So ancient civilizations of the Middle East, for example, I would probably call that a grand strategic game. Crisis, what's that? What's the damn Roman Crisis? Crisis of the 3rd Century game from Ray Farrell, game from GMT. Time of Crisis, I'd call that a grand strategic game. I'd probably call Cataclysm a grand strategic game as well. When we say grand, every time we kind of move up from, we got tactical, grand tactical, operational, grand operational, whatever the fuck that means. Strategic, grand strategic. We're kind of stepping up and up and up and up and taking a more global view as we continue to step up that stairway of scale descriptions. Okay. Hitler's War. No, I think Hitler's War is just strategic, actually. I think based on the definition I just gave you, this makes total sense. But I would describe Hitler's War as strategic with a map that's really abstract. In fairness, Jeff, Battles for the Ardennes is generally a better value than Campaign for North Africa. I mean, there's no this is not just you. It is a better value for the vast majority of people because you're probably going to play it, and or play the campaign, in which case you get a big, good sized game out of it, right? If you bought CNA, maybe you'd have played it, maybe you wouldn't have. And Clay has done some recent videos on Campaign for North Africa too, and I haven't had the chance. I've watched some of it. I'm like, I gotta watch the rest of these, and I just haven't had the time. And over the last 2 weeks have been absolutely bullshit. So on the other hand, if you have a computer to manage this minutia for you, then maybe you can make it work. And one of the things, kind of the model in Campaign for North Africa is actually pretty similar in a lot of ways to the model used in Gary Grigsby's War in the East. Plot to assassinate Hitler or Red Orchestra. No, I don't think it does. I think I label I have a column in the spreadsheet, which I'm trying to turn into an actual database, by the way, because there's a database will let me do things that Excel won't do. That said, it's probably overkill, but I might try to do it anyway. I could use a refresher on building a database. I haven't built one in 20 years. Claystone, I think it's just called Claystone X, actually. If you spell that all in one word, Claystone X, I think he'll come up. Also, if you search for Campaign for North Africa, he's one of only a few lunatics doing content on it, so you'll be able to find him that way. Yeah, I would describe Twilight Struggle as grand strategic. I think that's fair. Yeah, I don't. At this point, I got the last piece I needed for Europa was Fall of France, which I think is possibly the worst game in the whole series. But I'm like, well, shit. If I only need one, I'm going to buy the one. So I got it off of Fucko at Winterfest, and I got to give him like $80 or $90 for that. But so in the spreadsheet, I have a column for strategic, operational, and tactical. And I do not distinguish into grand tactical. It's either one of those three. But for stuff like Black Orchestra, I think is the one you're talking about. Red Orchestra is a first-person shooter. So I think Black Orchestra is the one we mean. I call those abstract scale. They're not anything specific. Another one like that is Battle Line, right? It's a simple trick-taking game. Scale is not really a thing Rainer Knizia was concerned about when designing that game. So that gets called abstract as well. So we are caught up to the chat. That is fantastic. We had a lot of folks in here tonight. I think we were over 200 at one point. No, the entire concept of scale simply does not apply to Secret Hitler. That is Werewolf, except that one of the cards is Hitler instead of the werewolf. That's all it is. So no thanks. Oh, interesting. Joseph Servison recommends SQLite for personal databases. The database is a text file easy to back up. Can do much of. I'll look into that actually. I'll hold on. I'm making a note. I got to write down because I'll totally forget this. I was using Microsoft Access actually is what I started with, a couple days ago. But I haven't really had a chance to do anything with this yet. I built a database table. That's as far as I got. So there you go, Claystone X. And if anybody's interested in the decision stuff, the Der Weltkrieg deal of the month, I'm going to throw a link to that in the chat as well. So, recognize how much time we got. 5 minutes. That's perfect. Recognize that for me, a lot of the value in the show is the interaction with the people. And how that helps me to kind of think through some processes of my own. We'll have noticed that we had a big phase there where we went through every week. It was like the best this, the best that, the best whatever. And we did one of those not too long ago, and we'll do that again. We'll come back to that. When I started designing a game, I started orienting the topics toward design-oriented topics, because those were the topics I was interested in kind of working out, which reminds me, I got to get back to somebody on GIS, which I also did not have time to do last week. A whole bunch of shit got not done in the last 10 days or so that otherwise needed to be done. I'm in principle amenable to running something that works where your actual database table is a text file. I'm amenable to that. I can live with that. Sounds like a pain in the ass, but for a personal database, I don't think it'd be a problem. If you're running a warehouse on it, I think that'd be a problem. But there we go. Vincenzo in at the end. So anyway. It's been a fairly full day. There was work with a half an hour break to go see the eclipse, admittedly. And the relatives are gone. They left actually on Saturday. So I've actually had, and then Sunday, I got so little done on Sunday. There is no, Jeff, I did not get it done. So I do have, the good news is that you're likely to get a couple in a row, because I did pick up the, Fifth Frontier War book, so I got that to talk about. And at the end of the week, I should be able to pick up the new, what is it going to be called? This is Free Trader Beowulf. This is the Shannon Appelkline History of Traveler. Having thought very highly of Shannon's work with the Designers and Dragons, and this is going to be way better for Traveler, right? So I'm all over this. I'm a day one order on this. So chances are pretty good you're going to see something about Fifth Frontier War. I just didn't get it done I needed to get it done over the weekend. And if it ain't done by now, it ain't getting done by 10 a.m. Tuesday morning. So anyway, so I think we are going to call it here, folks. We will have a show with Dan tomorrow night. I don't know what we'll do yet. Might just be us. We do have some guests lined up, but not for tomorrow. So we'll figure out what exactly we're going to do. And I hope to have an unboxing on Thursday, but I don't promise that because I have to do the taxes tomorrow. Tomorrow is basically the day to do the taxes. And if that happens, I ain't getting an unboxing video edited too. On the other hand, maybe it will be less aggravating than I think it will be. And if that's the case, then maybe I will be able to take a break at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or whatever it is and say, fantastic, everything's done. Fuck you, government. And I can go make a video. That's possible. But so Dave D'Angelo, this is a good video idea that no one is going to make. And here's why. In order to do a video, unless you want to just spout off like an idiot, like I do all the time, and with, half-baked information, which I guess you can do, and it doesn't bother me, obviously. But you'd have to play those terrible games, and nobody wants to spend the time to play the terrible games well enough to, really talk about them in detail. So I think I think it's a great idea, and you'd like to see like the 5 worst war games ever. In fact, you wouldn't go into that video expecting deep analysis. Let me put it that way. And I'm not going to spend 2 hours talking about shitty games. That's just not that is not what we do here. So I would the game sucks. I mean, I could talk about, I'm not particularly shy about saying so when I have a negative opinion of a game. But at the same time, I'd rather not be the guy that has nothing but negative opinions about games, right? I don't want to be the Yahtzee. I said to myself, I've taken a lot of, I think, valuable lessons from video game people. I don't want to be the Yahtzee Croshaw of war games, where you have nothing positive to say ever. You just bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch, and your entire personality is being a bitch. No, I'm not doing that. We have a cool hobby here filled with cool people, and I'd rather highlight that and talk about that. So now, hey, this is an angle that you could take that I think could work. If a game that a game I might do it. I don't know what the actual rating is. Storm of Steel, right? I've talked repeatedly about how I think this is an underrated game. Underrated games is a completely different thing. So yeah, by all means, you could get a lot of mileage out of that. I don't want to do, I don't have, so just so we're clear, Decision Games puts out some very fine games. They have released some stuff that's less fine too, and we all agree on that. Stigler happens to have a stronger opinion on the topic than I do. But I have, what is my current, this won't be up to date. Do I have it at all? This is not, okay, I'm going to show this. This is not up to date, folks. Or centered in the friggin' tab. All right, we're going to have to stop the screen and represent here. Give me a second here. We're going to be a couple minutes over here, folks, so apologies. This is the slightly out of date War Games by publisher. Now, I've added about 10 things since. All right, so I think that should fix the sound problem. Sorry about that, folks. I think we got it fixed now. Let me know if that's the case. Now we're a couple minutes over. We'll talk about the library by publishers next week. So everybody have a great rest of the night. Thanks to everybody who came out tonight. Thanks to the patrons of Ardwulf, Lair, who will get a thing in a minute. I actually dropped out of StreamYard and came back in. That actually fixed it. Resetting the microphone did not do anything. So once again, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Hopefully everybody had a good time. I certainly did until that last minute bullshit. So everybody have a great night. We'll see you all next week.